Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. The Road to Autonomy is brought to you in part by Stantec Generation AV. Stantec Generation AV combines some of the most experienced AV experts in the industry with the resources of a global engineering firm. Stantec Generation AV provides education, consulting, assessment, and guidance to any industry interested in autonomous vehicles. Learn more at stantec.com. Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. I am your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to have Andy Smart, Safety and Technical Standards Specialist, and an incredible person. Welcome to the podcast, Andy.
Thanks, Grayson. An incredible person. Gee whiz, that's the last time I'll hear that today.
Well, you got another really wonderful nickname. There's a great gentleman we both work with, Shane Blackmer, and he calls you the professor. So I can't wait for you to hold a beautiful lecture today.
Oh, I couldn't be further away from academia if I tried. But anyway, I'll try and honor that today, Grayson.
Okay, you've got a really good deal. Andy, when you were 10, you got your first bike and experienced mobility freedom. Please kindly talk about this experience, because I have really great experiences. I had a Redline 440, and I would ride that thing everywhere, jump over curves, and do all sorts of fun stuff. But you experienced this freedom in Scotland, and it went on to change your life. Talk about that, please.
It almost seems like this a scene from Braveheart, doesn't it? It is the freedom element. When I was younger, we lived on a very busy road. It was the A1 just outside Edinburgh. And for that reason, my parents wouldn't let me get a bike. And this is what I always wanted, because I wanted to get out there. And basically, it was the freedom that it would give me. So when we moved house to a quieter neighborhood, then that was it. And there was no stopping me after that. And it really was the mobility, the freedom it gave you. There are friends of mine who are into cross-country running, and I couldn't see the point in it myself, because you couldn't get far enough, fast enough running. To me, I can, between 15 and 20 miles an hour on a bicycle, I can get much further than somebody doing cross-country running. So that was it for me, Grayson. I was hooked at that point. 2 wheels, never looked back.
Did you want to go out and you're in the quiet neighborhood to explore the countryside, visit friends, or was it just freedom to, what was it?
It was really just getting out there on any road, any time. From where I was in Edinburgh, you could go out into the countryside fairly quickly. And that was it. It was just the freedom to explore. And we used to have friends, we used to go out and do all sorts of weird and wonderful things on building sites, make jumps, ramps, do all sorts of stupid things. Childlike things. No, probably stupid things as well, but we all learned, because that's what Band-Aids are for. But no, it was really just the freedom to explore and get out there. And that really, I've not looked back since then in terms of my life. And that's what I continue to do and continue to do to this day.
It's fun when you're a child and you're out there exploring and find, oh, here's a shell. We can build a mound out of dirt. And, here's some wood and we can make the jump even go bigger. And then, eventually somebody falls down and skins their knee, and you come home and you put some ointment in a Band-Aid and you go back out again, because we're kids and we were able to enjoy that freedom on our bicycles. And Andy, today you ride a bike without brakes. I have a bike that I ride on a regular basis, and I have brakes and I wear a helmet and I love it. Did you experience something back in Scotland that changed your perspective on bikes? That, okay, I'm going to do this without brakes. I'm going to master this. Or was it one of you or one of your friends doing a crazy jump? He said, wait a second, I can go faster and farther and higher without the brakes. What was it?
Well, where I lived, the chap that lived next door was a professional amateur cyclist. So he had some beautiful bicycles and what I'd describe really as mechanical art. And one of them was a track bike, and it was there with a fixed gear. It couldn't be simpler. Literally seat, handlebars, and pedals, and that was it, and you. And so it was really the feeling of you and the closeness to the road, and the most you'd ever be in control, because the only thing you had was the legs connecting you to the pedals to the road, and that was it. And so as a mechanical engineer, or later to be a mechanical engineer, it was the mechanical art, and it was literally the connection between you and the road, and everything you did was going to be the most efficient. And that was it for me. And since then, I've had all sorts of fancy bikes and all sorts of fancy materials. But it always came back to a single speed bike, which is all I have now in my basement. But the one I ride most is fixed gear, no brakes. And It is the biggest thrill you'll ever get. Well, one of the biggest thrills you'll ever get.
Do you ride that bike in mixed traffic?
Of course, that's where the fun begins. I'll put it into some context here. To me, it's all about the awareness of your surroundings and your connectivity to your environment. And you will never be more connected in that sense than when you're riding that, because you have to be tuned in both from an acoustic point of view, visual and acoustic. So you're looking for anything that moves around you. You've got to be prepared at all times for anything to go south, and always have an exit strategy, but also know what the sounds around you mean as well. So this is how the connection goes from just pedaling to being part of the environment. It sounds very, well, for me, it's being part of the surroundings is there. And from that, your awareness. And this is why when you get onto the motorbike as well, it just heightens that. But I'll give you another example. I know when there's a Prius behind me because I know the sound they make. You look around you for when people are going to move, and this is the same for motorcycles. I love spoked wheels on a car. Why? Because you can see them start to rotate. And if you see them start to rotate, you've got to think of plan B, plan C, plan D, because your expectation is those people are going to be pulling out in front of you.
You're highly in tune with your surroundings. It's you and the machine. There's nowhere to go. You have to absolutely know what's going on. I love it. You have to have your exit strategy. And you shared an incredible story. You were riding in the car with your wife and you sped around something, and you ended up doing something really great because you avoided a potential crash. Will you please kindly tell that story? Because it's a very powerful story that really goes into who you are and how you approach safety.
That's a good one, Grayson. So my wife and I were heading out west from Michigan to California, which we do, road trips, and driving is something I absolutely love. We're on divided highway and we're behind a truck. And to my wife's surprise, I suddenly went full throttle and overtook the truck. And my wife looked at me and just asked me, "What the heck were you doing? What the heck's going on? Why'd you do that?" And just as she asked me that, there was a loud bang. And so I said to her, what I could hear on the windshield were little pieces of rubber that were hitting the windshield. And I knew it was only a small amount of time before the truck tire would blow. So that's why, it was the intuition, knowing what it was and taking action immediately. Because if you've ever come across a large slither of truck tire in the road, they are lethal. And so, anyway, self-preservation, Grayson, how to get around it. So to me, it was just some things that you do, but that's, people talk about, operational design domain and all these things. That is an edge case. And it's a case of, so how are you going to get around that? What sensors are you going to have to program to get to that kind of feeling? And that's what it is. It is all about the feeling. And that's where I believe we're still a fair way off to be able to meet a lot of these edge cases. You don't meet them every day, but they are real. Especially trucks are on the road every day, and you see the amount of truck tires lying at the side of the road. So this is very real.
Is the awareness of surroundings and the ODD and edge cases, is that really the beginning step of developing safety for autonomy? And Andy, on the backside of that, have all these experiences that you've experienced from your bike with no brakes, your motorbike, on understanding your surroundings on the road, has that influenced the way that you fundamentally approach safety? Because you live these situations. If I'm in a car, I want you driving. If I'm taking a VIP, a high profile individual who is a security threat, I want you driving because you're looking at every single element around to determine what is the worst possible outcome and how do I avoid that.
Well, thanks, Chris. I think it also goes back to when, again, it's the experience. I was driving when I was 17. I got my license 2 weeks after my 17th birthday. That's when you could get them in the UK. Within 2 weeks after that, I'd written off my first car. So that isn't a great claim to fame. But what happened thereafter, and I've done my gurney time, both there and a few other occasions, but we don't need to go into that right now. What I had to do to prove to my parents that I could get into a car again, because they all clearly were somewhat skeptical, was I took an advanced driving course with the Loading and Borders Police. And my key takeaway from that was what they taught us, which was then a verbal commentary as you were driving. And they trained you to be, again, very aware of your surroundings, but rather than just to think it, they wanted to hear it. So you'd go out with an instructor, and this was part of the test, where you would verbalize everything around you as you were driving. What was behind you, what was in front of you, what was moving, what was static, what could happen, your action, your reaction. And that really tuned your mind and how to observe, effective observation, and everything around you, and make some assumptions, because you have to, but then correct that, because it's all happening in real time. So when you add that to other experiences I've had, I'll maybe give you another one. So I was out on my motorcycle, I was rear-ended by a Chevy Avalanche with bull bars. And a Chevy Avalanche is bad enough, but the bull bars were the worst piece. But I'm a great believer in my motorcycles that loud pipes save lives. And because I like engines and I like a lot of noise, and especially some motorcycle engines. So this was a Harley, so it had a decent noise going to it. The issue was the gentleman who was distracted when he hit me was deaf. So how many times does that happen? So you're there on a motorcycle thinking, well, everyone can hear me. And most people could. Not this chap. And so he was distracted, couldn't hear. And then next thing I knew, I was flying through the air. So the good thing is you've got to dress for the slide and not the ride. And so anyway, that was some more gurney time for me. But again, it's these things you've got to then appreciate. So I'm not a raving academic when it comes to a lot of the safety principles. I'm very well read with these things, but I tend to be, from a practical perspective, I'm looking through the lens of the driver and also the environment and the connection between the two. That's where I'm coming from.
You're living this. I love that you said that you're not an academic. You still are the professor, because you actually have real world experience. You practically live this. You've ended up in the gurney from situations that have not been out of your control. And you have a great line, which I want to reemphasize, is incredible. Loud pipes save lives. So me being me, knowing you pretty well, I got to ask, is that why you like Motorhead so much?
Yep, that's why my ears were ringing for 3 days after the first Motorhead concert I went to. So, we are Motorhead and we play rock and roll.
And you are Andy Smart and you understand safety.
That's right. Thank you.
Andy, so you've had all these incredible life experiences. You're living the dream. You're doing things. You still got that little kid in you when you're out there experiencing your freedom on your two wheels, either powered by your legs or powered by an engine. When did your passion for mobility first begin? Was it back to those early days in Scotland when you experienced freedom on your bike, or was there something later in your life that said, you know what, this is the career path I want to go. This is really exciting. And I don't want to just go down this career path. I want to live this career path.
Yeah, just to your previous point, I'm 23 years of age, but with an additional 36 years of experience, stitched onto that and growing. When I was at school, I always wanted to be an engineer. That's what I wanted to be. So the expectation was I'd stay in Edinburgh, go to Heriot-Watt University, which had a great mechanical engineering course, and that was it. Anyway, me being me, I said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do automotive engineering, because that's what I want to do, because I want to be involved with vehicles, motorbikes, cars, trucks. That's what I want to do. And I don't want to do mechanical engineering. I want to do this. And that's what I started to do, for reasons that we may not go into just now. I ended up getting a mechanical engineering degree, but that's another story. But But no, I wanted to focus upon that because that was important to me. And then you talk about, well, I talk about the feeling you have. And one of my first, it was a kind of internship that turned into a job. I was at the Motor Industry Research Association in Nuneaton in England. And so I was there as an intern, and I went as a vehicle safety engineer. And people always talk about energy and yes, speed, energy is the square of the speed. And it's like, well, okay, great. You can understand the formula and you can go into that. But when you're standing there and there's a vehicle crash test about to happen, and the linear motor, you hear a small hum, and then it's silent. And then this vehicle is just propelled in front of you up to an obstacle, whether it's head-on, angle, or whatever. And there's a very cold feeling. The hairs in the back of your neck go up. So you see that crash at 30 miles an hour. And you go through all of high-speed photographies there. And then you analyze that. You're looking at the reaction. All the dummies are there. That's when everything was just accelerometers. We're talking old school here now, Grayson. But then you do the same test at 35 miles an hour, and you would be amazed at what 5 mile an hour difference does in terms of the damage. And I mean damage, and that's both to the vehicle and then, linked to the people, the occupants, or anything else. So then you get the true feeling of what this means. Then add that to my gurney time and things like that. Then you do get a real personal feeling for all this stuff, and it's real. And then you got to keep it real, because the moment you don't, then in a lot of cases, it's just white noise. And then you got to be real with this stuff, because it is real. And when I was learning to drive, and there's one thing I'll always remember, I was told, you must always remember you are driving a lethal weapon. That's both to you and to the people around you. Never, ever forget that. And I didn't. That's why I'm saying it today. But I don't know. It's not just people today. God, I sound like some old geezer. But I think people are becoming numb to a number of these things, especially with the technologies that people are surrounding themselves with. And in my humble opinion, a lot of people are tending now to abdicate responsibility to the technologies around them and are not taking personal responsibility for driving this lethal weapon.
I want to stay on the lethal weapon topic, and I'm going to go down a personal topic here. I don't know, way back when your dad met my dad, or the individual that told you that, my father said the same thing. This is a lethal weapon that will not only kill you, it will kill other people. You have to treat it with care and respect. It is not a toy.
Yep.
And that was drilled into my head, just like you said, if it was your father or another individual drilled it into your head, it was drilled into my head. And my dad took this one step further. He said, I'm not going to teach you how to drive a car. It's too easy. I'm going to teach you how to drive a box truck. It's big and boxy. You have to watch height restrictions. And oh, by the way, you have no rear view mirror. So how are you going to maneuver this? And so I learned how to drive a box truck before I learned how to drive a car. And it was one of those elements, and you have to understand all of his nuances of where if you get into a car, you have to understand that. And then my dad, being my dad with his funny sense of humor, says, okay, next, here's a stick. Figure this out.
Oh, wow. Now, if you gave that to basically young people today, and then you gave the instructions in cursive through all of those things, they'd be absolutely lost. And but no, I can so relate to that. People would say, what's the best driving experience you've had? Thinking it'd be fast cars and things like that. Well, to me, fast bikes take it, because again, you're closer to the connectivity. But one thing that a great experience, I worked for a truck manufacturer in the UK, and I was going around their proving ground. So you're on a high-speed proving ground in a truck, and a young guy. And that was just one of these awesome experiences where you're there. The steering wheel isn't static. It's a whole moving experience, because the cab's bouncing, the seat's bouncing. You've got major tonnage behind you. And that's not for the faint of heart. So I have total and utter respect for the people, the over-the-road truck drivers. But the thing that then comes from that is maneuvering, as you said with the box truck. This was an articulated vehicle, and I was doing a mirror project. And the first thing he said was, they put me in a turning place and said, okay, Andy, go into this space here. Oh my God. Your respect for people who could do that just multiplied, because you couldn't see a thing. But you've got to, again, it's the feeling. In the end, I did it. But it's to have the respect for what you're doing, how you're doing it, but a feeling for when to turn, why. It's all about the feeling, man. That's what it's all about. And that's what I feel is missing so much. It's like, what do the numbers mean? What does it really mean? And if you don't have the feeling, you got nothing.
You're right about that. And my dad threw another curveball. Said, okay, we're going to go to the loading bay. Try and get this in the loading dock. No help. And this is before we had backup cameras for our listeners. There was no backup cameras. There was no beep, 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 beep sensors. This is all using your side view mirrors. We had the little circle on the bottom so you can see the bottom. I'm trying to get it right to the loading dock because, we had fresh produce in there. And if it made a mess, well, not good. So it's all these little things, because you're right. It's all about the feeling and understanding what the vehicle is capable of.
Well, it is. I remember I dropped my wife off. I was just going to find a parking spot. I got there, reversed in, got out of the car, walked down the street, and this person stopped me. And I thought, okay, what's going on here? And they said, you're from Europe, aren't you? And I said, I beg your pardon, in my best American accent. I said, you're from Europe, aren't you? I said, well, yes. Why'd you ask? Great parking. And I said, yep, that's what they teach us to do over there. And that was it. I just thought, okay. But you'll learn how to throw the car in there. And that's what it's all about. And it's just, again, using the mirrors. You know how long your vehicle is, all this stuff. Your dad sounds like a great guy. I could get on with him. You hate him at the time because he's putting these challenges in. But if you get that right, the rest is really easy.
And you never forget it.
No, never.
You could have said to the individual there, say, hey, listen, I took an advanced driving course with the police in Scotland. I'm certified European.
I'm certified for something. I'm still trying to find that.
And today, Andy, we're talking a lot about human-driven vehicles. We haven't gotten into ADAS yet, but the world's changing. We're moving to automation. There's an incredible focus from the private markets, the public markets on autonomous vehicles, and you're one of the leading authorities on AVs. Love to know, so you have all this really cool experience on bicycles, motorbikes, driving vehicles, crash testing. When did you put this all together and say, wait a second, automation's the future, this is coming, I'm really interested in this?
Oh, gosh. I've always been interested in the technology. I've always been an inquisitive engineer. And you could see the writing on the wall, from the mechanical side to the electromechanical to the full electronic control. Because early in my career, I was, from safety and human factors, I was not given the choice. I was then brought in as a powertrain engineer. And that's what the chief engineer told me I was going to do. And you don't argue with the chief. So I carried on with that. And so the complexities of an internal combustion engine or powertrain are considerable. And you get the mindset with that and the technology, but then it became, to me, it's part of the propulsion system of the vehicle, etc., and all the vehicle technologies that come with it. That's what I enjoyed. One was just how to propel you. The rest was what's all around you. I joined SAE as the CTO, and SAE as an organization needed to change and really extend from their traditional roots into the electronic or the higher new technology age. And that's, talking active safety, cyber, automation, all of these things. And that's when it became even more important to me as both SAE's mission and my own personal one is to ensure that this was brought into the hands of the engineering community. And that's why I really was pushing this in terms of connectivity, automation, and the safety side. And I was real proud as the CTO there when J3016 was issued. That was the first edition relating to taxonomy and definitions that came out now to everyone describes it at level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And it was a foundation document, and really proud of that. And also it came out during that time also relating to cybersecurity, and two great things that really changed. And SAE is much better for that. And the introduction of this new technology. But that's where we're going. And the electrification also, as you bring that in, electrification is not new. It's been around, it was competing with internal combustion engines back in the day. But people forget about that. It's a case of who has the great idea and who moved on and who won the race. Was it Blu-ray or whatever?
HD,
Yeah.
DVD.
So it just happened. It was ICE that won the day. And but electrification now, for whatever reason, is out there. And the two will battle out. It's a case of, okay, I'm going to go down other rabbit holes. There was always the well to wheel. That was all what you were looking at in terms of fossil fuel consumption. Well to wheel in terms of what it would take to get it out of the ground and to propel a particular vehicle. All this, the consultants were doing it. Great graphs, great graphics. But now, from an EV perspective, I'm not wholly convinced it is as green as or more efficient than. It's all relative, and especially with rare earths, how you get it out the ground. Anyway, we're going down a different rabbit hole, but in terms of the technologies of what's going forward, that was important to transition. And for me, all of these technologies combining, although an EV doesn't have to be an AV, doesn't have to be a connected V, the three can be mutually exclusive, but combined, I think that is part of the future, depending upon different business models. But I think we'll be getting automated trucks with diesel engines, and that'll be carrying on. And people will wonder, how can you have an internal combustion engine with automation? Golly gee, how did you do that?
You bring up a lot of really great points. For the past 6 months, become a supply chain relating to minerals and rare earths geeks. On a previous podcast, I had Mark Mills from the Manhattan Institute, and Mark worked in the Reagan White House on economics, and he broke down the global supply chain of minerals and made a really compelling argument about there's no such thing as renewable energy because the energy that goes in to get these things is actually dirty, and coal supported the energy grid. But the most important thing, he said, 90% of the world's lithium goes through China when it gets refined. And so we're actually doing a disadvantage and actually causing more carbon pollution by going electric. And there's not enough talk that's going on about the global supply chain on rare earths. You have issues in Chile with the lithium mines. You have issues in the DRC, commonly known as the Congo, with cobalt. And the mineral world, the commodity world is not clean. And we can look back in history. There was a very famous part in the last day of the Clinton presidency, Mark Rich from Glencore. Okay, just follow the paper trail. Commodities is a very interesting world into itself, and it's not fully understood. And it'd be really interesting if the media actually pulled back the curtain on the supply chain, because for years and years and years, there was a very famous movie with a very famous actor who drove a Prius by the name of Leonardo DiCaprio. Some individuals might know him as Leo DiCaprio. There's such thing in this world called blood cobalt. We don't talk about the blood that goes into the supply chain as relates to the vehicle. That's a whole interesting debate for another day, but I'm very happy you brought that up. And also thank you for bringing up the fact that trucks will run on diesel, autonomous trucks. They will, and robo-taxis will run in hybrid. Brian Selesky, the incredible co-founder and CEO of Argo, has stated publicly in multiple interviews over the past 2 years, we're a business. We're not a technology product. I cannot have my vehicles running all day having to stop and charge if I have to build a business. We're going to do hybrid on day one until the technology perfects itself. That's the right approach because it's a business. And when you look at some other companies, we've talked a lot about safety. It's, safety, safety, safety. It's a business to them. It's a buzzword. It's a way to sell things. But as you and I talked about from the individual that you spoke to that taught you that, and my father, cars are not about safety. They're a lethal weapon, and you have to treat them with respect. In the life cycle of these autonomous vehicle companies, when do they begin to take safety seriously? We've all seen very public incidents where these companies said, okay, we'll just say we're safety and we're going to do things that we're not supposed to do. When does that change, or are we already at the point where that's completely changed because of those very, very public incidents?
Gosh, where do we start? Where's my soapbox? I need to get on that. I think the safety side to it is we have, let's just take in terms of automation. Safety is being hailed as major improvements in safety. That's true. That's true. But it's also different business models that come with it, and they're being created, especially for passenger carrying vehicles. If you look at safety, well, let's just carry on with that one. And so we look at different companies who are developing this technology. So let's just call them the ADS developers. And so whether they're startup companies, the new technology companies who then are through M&A activities are working now with, say, larger companies and closer now to OEs and things like that. But when they began, they are technology companies and startup technology companies. They're not transportation safety companies. And so it's the tech they're interested in. And the whole purpose of doing this is for the tech and the investment community. And that's why people like Intel paid $15 billion for Mobileye. And that's why. And it's business decision, thank you very much. And technology decision. But when you look forward, then they need to transition truly into the application. And this is where some of the young guns still need help transitioning into being part of a vehicle company. And back to our point earlier, vehicles being lethal weapons rather than just a technology. It's not a technology demonstrator. It can be when you're in a private domain and a test track or a proving ground. But when you're out on the road testing, then it's a whole different ball of wax. And it's a whole different set of rules you've got to work by. And that's where these organizations need support from people who have experience in doing this from a safety perspective to help them. Because if not, the biggest concern I have is, and even now it's the same with Tesla, issues have happened and all of a sudden it's over, it's media headlines. So the general public read that and all of a sudden, automotive or autonomous technology or AVs or however they want to talk about them is bad. And if that's the case, the public confidence in them drops. And if it drops, then, okay, maybe a few more years before we can start saving more lives. And that is my biggest frustration, where we need to get real with how a lot of these things are communicated, how the public sees this, and they're looking through the right lens. Because if they don't, it can put things back. And I look at, you go through different presentations, and everybody's got it used to be in the engine world. The standard presentation was, here's all the regulations and emission regulations over the next 10 years. Okay, everyone had one. It's a standard. Now the standard slide is all the NHTSA figures, and everybody puts it up and people go, oh gosh, isn't it awful? 40,000 people are dead. Oh yeah, that's pretty bad, isn't it? Yeah, white noise, move on. It's like, come on, wake up. If it was your family that were part of the 40,000, you'd get with the program pretty darn quickly, wouldn't you? And this is where my biggest concern is people are, okay, I'll go down another rabbit hole. The NTSB have had vehicle connectivity on their most wanted list for several years. Why? Because it's more than just a good idea. If vehicles are connected, or the people within the vehicles are connected, and the vehicle to the infrastructure are connected, then information can be transferred, and that could help and potentially save lives. NTSB see this, but hey, where is that today? Nowhere. And they keep every year is the same. And, I'm politically agnostic on this, but they report directly to Congress, and it's still on the list, and 40,000 people are dying every year again. Okay, so what's happening?
Nothing. It's sad because you mentioned the 40,000 deaths, which are incredibly sad, but what's even more tragic than that, it's never reported when there's a crash that leads to a fatality. But if a celebrity or a famous person gets in a crash that leads to fatality, it's news head. But the individual that perished in that crash was a celebrity to their family. And it completely rocked and changed their world. And we have to realize that the roads are dangerous. As we said earlier, and I know I'm harping on this, vehicles are lethal. And what we're doing as an industry to propel autonomous vehicles will not only save lives, it will do good by society because the individuals that could have perished in a human-driven vehicle and uprooted that family and had an incredible, very sad tragedy will no longer happen due to the advancements that autonomous vehicles are making on the industry. And Andy, that raises the question of how can an autonomous vehicle company on day one say, we are going to develop a culture of safety because we care about profits, we care about our shareholders, but more importantly, we care about society because we don't want any more of these tragic accidents, crashes that could be avoided to ever, ever, ever happen again.
The whole basis of a safety culture in an organization is above any business objectives. It has to be. You're held to a higher level. And business decisions shouldn't relate around safety. Safety decisions are made because of safety, not through business decisions. And that's the fundamental. And that's where the companies, my viewpoint on this is safety is a holistic activity. And it's not just a lot of, this the two standards that are all, no, the three standards that are always quoted is ISO 26262, functional safety, SOTIF, safety of the intended function, and then UL 4600. Three standards, three great documents, but that's for the vehicle. But when you say, so what's behind all that? I'd say, okay, that's where the air quotes here, that's where the rubber meets the road. But to me, you've got to get to that point. And I liken it back to the late 80s when ISO 9000, in terms of the quality standard, really came out, that they felt that, quality standards were important. And therefore, everyone had to have the processes in place. And to me, it was a major milestone for the automotive industry when this started. And for, to meet these requirements, I've been on more quality courses than I've had hot dinners. But it always said to me, there's only three things that are important here. What are those? Management commitment, and management commitment. And that was all. And you see companies, fine, they're good for 6 months, and then all of a sudden they move on. But it was through that quality culture, and it was important. And then it went throughout the organization. And fast forward to today, my belief is we need a safety management or a safety culture within an organization, and we need to instill things similar to what they have in aviation, but appropriate to automotive, relating to a safety management system. And so it's embedded in the organization. So it's not just the car, it's the mindset of the people. So it's not just, the safety department that's responsible, it's everybody. And that is what's important. When people ask me, when you look to assess companies and go around there, what do? You go in and, have your initial discussion with the CEO. I'm going, no. You go the night before and you go around the back. Well, what'd you do with that? I said, I'll look in the dumpster, talk to the people around the back, the basic kick the tires of the organization as the people are there. And you just chew the fat and just chat, because that's real. And these are the people that are involved and engaged in the organization. And it's get the feeling. It's not just the doctrine according to the boss, which is important, but the boss has got to, walk the talk, and people have to be able to call everyone out for that. And it's just the mindset. And that's so important to me, and the culture within the organization of what they're doing. So add the culture and a safety management system with the standards and others which are being developed relating to the vehicle technology and the safety of the vehicle itself and the systems associated with it. Then we're off to the races.
And does that give a company a unique advantage if they take this approach from day one?
Yes. In my view, it does. That's what's very, very important. And if you do that, then I was involved with the company, and this is, the technology is important, and their deadlines are important, and they need to get the vehicles on the road, out the door. And my comment to them was, so I used my grown-up outdoor voice and said, I may have thrown an expletive in here, here and there, but it's a case of, you can do that, but I guarantee you, if there's an issue and the NTSB come knocking at your door, you'll have all the time in the world to fix all of this. And at which point they did stop and reevaluated and said, okay. So again, people just need to know what the consequences are of their actions. And I wasn't there scaremongering. This is reality. And this happens. And again, it's just the safety mindset.
Did you put on your Lemmy voice?
I can't go that low, actually, and I don't have sideburns. But anyway, apart from that, yes.
Well, you're very serious, and you're taking this very, very serious approach to where you're leading safety as part of Stantec Gen AV team. Could you talk about that program and why it's so important for the industry?
It is important. It really, people know me, and what I beat the drum is really a holistic safety approach. And that really is starting from understanding the environment. And people talk about the ODD, and that's another topic for another day, but people seem to also forget about that, where it used to be, and going back to when we're learning to drive, the ODD was a combination of the functional capabilities of the vehicle and the capabilities of the individual behind the wheel. And most vehicles and bikes I've driven and ridden, the capabilities of the vehicle far outshine the abilities of the rider and driver. But that's what it was. If you've ever spoken to an elderly relative or anybody who said, I don't feel comfortable driving at night, well, that's their ODD. They don't drive at night. They only drive during daylight hours. So anyway, you go through the ODD side, you start it's just adding it all up from the environment, the technology, then the technology within the environment. So it's just building this up. So you get a true picture of how you're assessing the safety elements up until that point. Then it's a case of the facilities you put them in, and people sometimes forget about it. It's a case of, you've done your testing, or you're about to go out on the road, or you're a transit authority and you're deploying vehicles on the road. So where do you store the vehicles? How do you do that? Again, that's part of it all. It is a holistic approach. Then you just add on to that from the planning and deployment. Then it's the management, back to the safety culture, the metrics, or the key objectives here, how they deal with emergency services, how the management and the business operations deal with all of this. So you must add it all up. And then once you've gone through all of that, people look at things through a very different lens, or hopefully they already do that. And so basically it's, like-minded people. But if not, you really have to bring them along and show them why. Maybe I should take on some gurney time, then they'd get a better idea.
You have a clear understanding of this, and that raises the question, there's no standard, so how can safety be measured and quantified when there's no industry-recognized metric, or as I said, standard?
Oh, it's a tricky one. If we look at, I had this conversation the other day, and in a lot of cases, it's the taxonomy and definitions where we are at the moment. And a number of standards and are putting numbers to things and starting to develop certain tests and validation. But we are behind. Normally it was the technology, then the standards come, then regulations follow. And it's all been, for decades, that's been the way. But now the technology is way out in front. And so what we're having to do now, and there's nothing wrong with this, you got to adapt. And if you just stick to saying, oh, well, there's no standard for this, and just rub your hands and say, oh, well, nothing I can do here, well, you are wrong. Because you've then got, and companies I've dealt with here, they then look around and say, okay, so let me look into the boiler industry. What the heck's boilers got to do with AVs? Well, boilers have a lot of safety elements to them, so there's some safety process. How can I adapt that to AVs? And some people look at you, as if you just lost it at that point. You haven't, because what you're doing is, as engineers, it's our responsibility to go in and look to say, okay, who already does this? Let's benchmark other industries. We're not unique, and we're into some groundbreaking stuff here. But hey, would you believe mining? There's been automated mining trucks for the last 35 years. So hey, maybe we could learn a bit from them. But it's different. Yeah, great, it's different, but learn, adapt. Because there again, as engineers, you've got to put your hand on your heart and say, I did my best, and I did everything I could to find out what was the right way to do it, and that's what I did. And that's to me, that's our responsibility. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now.
Your soapbox is great in learning from boilers. We had the Hartford Steam Boiler Company, which was the first insurance company to insure that, which is now owned by Munich Re, who's a large reinsurer in the space. And you can learn a lot. We can learn a lot. And Alex Roy, I know you're a listener and you're a good friend, sir. And you're on your soapbox this weekend talking all about the history of Otis Elevator. And so you can learn a lot
Yes.
from the elevator company. And most importantly, you brought up mining. There's been automation in mining for years and years and years. But the big difference between passenger vehicles and mining is mining automation is highly profitable, generating an enormous amount of revenue. All you have to do is look at the 20-year historical appreciation of Caterpillar stock, ticker CAT. You can see that automation in mining is working. And if you speak to them, not only is it working from a shareholder's perspective, it is working from a quality of life perspective because they're able to do remote operations of those vehicles on the remote mines of Australia. So we are learning a lot from those industries. And I love to know, you mentioned functional safety, you mentioned holistic safety. For a listener who says, oh, it's an alphabet soup or it's buzzword soup, let's start with functional. How would you describe in very simple professor terms, what is functional safety?
So from a functional safety point of view, you are then going through, literally this comes to the electrical and electronic side primarily, and it's not an automotive standard. It was used in general, has been really adopted by the automotive industry. So what you're then doing is going through the certain risks associated with it, and then levels of risk. You're then assessing back in terms of the verification and validation. So you are ensuring that the initial function that was or elements were designed will function correctly, and you've associated all risks associated with that and put forward development or test programs to validate that. So you're basically going through the steps to ensure the function of the system. You then put the functional side, and then you start adding all the elements around it. So it's just the functional safety side is just a piece of the safety jigsaw, and it's just one piece. So, okay, it's not a 1,000-piece jigsaw, but it could be. These are complicated enough. But the holistic side is then everything you're doing from a technical perspective, add in the organizational side, the compliance, all of these elements, and it becomes a much bigger, it's the bigger picture as regards safety company-wide, and ensuring that everyone is aligned with the safety objectives. I'd said to a company recently, and I just wanted to ask the question. It was a picture of a gentleman in a truck. I think he was cleaning one of the LiDAR pucks. And I said, no, that's it for me, because you're all taking responsibility for it all. The guy who's washing the truck and ensuring all the parts are then functioning correctly, that's what it's all about. And it's everybody's responsibility. And you've got to ensure that everything it's all about, with those vehicles, operational readiness. So that's why, yes, you get out there, because you go back, one of the very interesting, there was a SAE government industry meeting, was a couple of years ago, and IAHS were presenting, I forget the gentleman's name, but he was then talking about what happens. This was different cameras. If you have a broken windscreen, the recalibration that is required from the camera. And what about if you have a prang and some of the sensors are put out of, say there's been some movement in, say, the bumper or fender. And so what happens then? Or if there's some respray and some paint gets over it, or somebody puts some sticker over the top, what happens? You'd be amazed. And by doing that, we have to ensure that you look around, this is where it's the people that say, I know so much. Grayson, I know so little, because the more I find out, the less I know, and it's bigger and bigger and bigger. So yeah, you think it's a 10-piece jigsaw. No, it's a 100-piece. No, it's not. It's a 1,000-piece. And it's really down to the guy who's ensuring the function of the sensors on board before they go out on the road, and he's cleaning the vehicle, making sure everything's sorted, because it goes back to the IHS, just for the general public. And this is where people need to be aware. Is everything working correctly on the vehicle? When you got your vehicle back from being rebuilt because you had a prang in it, Are the sensors working correctly? Did you have the windscreen replaced? Was the camera recalibrated? Because you might find that some of these sensors have a direct input into the emergency braking system you have on board. And so I hope, if you're depending upon it, and if you're depending upon it, then you've got to make sure it works. And I think we're at that kind of crossroads at the moment where there's so much technology in there, in the vehicles. We have to ensure the education of the people who are working on our vehicles. And a lot of places, very well educated technicians, total respect to them. We just got to ensure that this is happening. And you just got to make sure that when you've parked your car in a parking lot and you expect the guy coming around to replace your windshield because it was convenient for you to have 3 o'clock on a Monday afternoon in a car park for him to change it, that when you drive home that night, everything's working as it should. So always be aware. And there was, a small rabbit hole. Indulge me for a second. And people who know me will be bored of this story, but I was at an event and I was speaking to, just say, a young person, and we were talking about different sensors on the vehicle. And they said, yeah, they just recently got a vehicle, and this blind spot awareness or blind spot protection is great, when the light comes on in the mirror. Because this person knew as soon as the light went out, it was safe to overtake. And I asked them to repeat that. They said, yeah, it's great. As soon as the light goes out, I overtake. And I had to stop them and say, please, for the love of God, for me, just look over your shoulder just before you do it, just for me, would you? Because if something happened to go wrong, or something that was just outside the field of view, or there was something just not quite right, I'd hate for your dependency upon this technology. Just don't be wholly dependent upon it. Just glance over your shoulder, would you? Just for me. And that scared the bejeebers out of me, because if that is what we're down to, and that was utter dependency upon this little filament going out, and I'll overtake. Because if I'm on my motorbike and I'm just to the left of that car and the light went out and she pulls out in front of me, I don't want to die. Not for a filament bulb.
That goes into your whole theory that you live your entire life of being aware. And it also raises the question where you said everyone's responsible. There's some individuals that have an over-reliance on ADAS, level 2 plus, level 2 have this reliance that it's a self-driving car. For the record, there is no self-driving car that you can go into a dealership and buy today that's going to take you home. But the public believes this. And Andy, you told a story, and the individuals that are listening here that know me really well, they say, oh, here he goes again with this story. I was at a function at a hotel where alcohol was served, and we take an Uber, and we're having a great time. And this older lady had a few too many, and she was feeling real good. In the morning, she probably felt not good, but she was feeling real good at that moment. And I said, ma'am, can I call you an Uber or a Lyft or a taxi to take you home? No, son, you don't understand. I have a Tesla. It's going to drive me home. And I said, ma'am, your Tesla is not going to drive you home. We will get you an Uber or Lyft. May I have your address? I said, no, it's going to take me home. And so I had to get one of the individuals that were working at the party. Said, this lady's intoxicated. She thinks her car is going to drive home. I can tell you for a fact it's not. Either put her up in a hotel room or get her a Lyft. And it was a struggle. They finally got the keys away from her because she thought that it could drive her home. It's the over-reliance on ADAS. So in the case of the over-reliance on ADAS, who's responsible for a crash? Is it the human behind the wheel that has an over-reliance? Is it the manufacturer, or is it the insurance company that insured him? Who is responsible for that crash, and when do you start to see this played out in the courts? Because to me, this all seems like this is going to end up as a Harvard business case study, because it's going to be lawsuit after lawsuit to eventually settle the legal responsibility.
Oh, gee, okay, let's step into that minefield, shall we? I'm not afraid. I'll run. To me, there is the person who's making the decisions is responsible. They have primary responsibility. The event data recorder, EDR on board, as we say, the data will always set you free. So, if you can get the data out of the recorder, depends upon what legal activities you're involved in. But there is some of the technology is still at its early days. Even 2018 model year, 29 model year, 2020, 2021. It's still. I'm going to say it's in its infancy. And let me give you an example. So I won't mention manufacturers, but in my 2019 Ford Explorer Sport, I had to turn it had the active lane assist. What it should be known as is vehicle pinball. As you go from left to right to left to right, that's because you spent more time looking at the little object in the dash to see if it was the lane lines were coming up in terms of is it green, good, it works. If not, they're grayed out. So you used to spend your time looking down, and I thought, this is actually dangerous because I'm taking my eyes off the road to see if the system is picking up the lane lines so I can ensure that I'm going along here. And if it is working, then I'm going from left to right to left. Keep your hands on the wheel. Clearly, keep your hands on the wheel at all times. But this is a bit disconcerting. So 2020 model year was much better. So I'm told. That's great. But people go into different vehicles with different levels of fidelity or different, I'm not going to say levels of technology, levels of capability and refinement of that technology. And that's where we're not all at the same level. But the responsibility has to be primarily the person who's behind the wheel. This is why when you get to ADS, it's who's making the decisions. If I'm not behind the wheel, I'm not in charge of the controls, then I'm not responsible. But for the person who is, and you must keep your hands on the wheels at all times, children. That's what you're taught. And, to my sort of urban philosopher, Ron White, you can't, and people who know me know this one, you can't fix stupid. And that's absolutely correct. And you go through all the numbers, we mentioned the 40,000 or less than, but between 7,000 and 9,000 people die every year, going back to your intoxication story, due to drunk driving or not wearing a seatbelt. So out of just under 40,000, 7,000 to 9,000, that's it. That's 7,000 to 9,000 people that die because they didn't put a seatbelt on, or they didn't put the seatbelt on the child that was in the back or the front. And then you just go, people have to take personal responsibility. And, you can put interlocks in here and breath detection and all this stuff, but take personal responsibility for the love of God.
You know what? Seatbelts are cool. That's the way I was taught. My grandfather said, car doesn't start till the seatbelts are on. You know what? They're cool. Oh, they're cool. Yeah, cool people wear seatbelts. Okay, that resonated real fast. And we wanted to get where we were going. We wanted to get there efficiently. And then when we put the seatbelt on right away, you're going to laugh. We got a CB radio. And boy, oh boy, was that fun until I'm a little kid and you start hearing some explicitives. Oh, turn that off. Turn that off.
It's not the technology is cool, but I'm with you. And that's why with younger children, when it comes to riding a bicycle, put a helmet on. The parents should have a helmet as well, because you've got to lead by example. But yeah, okay, make cool helmets and all sorts of stuff so that kids want to put them on. And it's like, yeah, it's just normal. I wear, and I've always worn, a full face motorcycle helmet. Always have, always will. And I'm not an open face guy. I did go up the road the other day just to check. I was doing something on my bike and I just had to go up and back. So I had to listen to something. So I didn't have a helmet on. Low speed, I admit. But to me, the sunglasses you wear are not the only safety equipment you have on a motorbike. I dress for the ride, not the slide. And I cringe, absolutely cringe, when people go by me and it's shorts and flip-flops and T-shirts. And I'm there with a leather jacket, leather pants, boots, and a helmet. And I shake my head over to them. But, when I was on the gurney, and I told them explicitly, you will not cut these leather pants off me. I will take them off no matter what pain I'm in. You need to remove those and not cut them off me. And we came to an amicable agreement. But you've got to do that. And if you don't, and what they tell me is that all you have to do is watch. You only do it once, because if you have road rash and they clean that road rash out with bleach and a brush, and I'll tell you one thing, you won't do that again in a hurry because the pain is immense, and it focuses the mind a little. So anyway, we're off topic a little, but it's taking responsibility for it all, going back to what we say. And if that's what you do, and unfortunately, there are too many instances of drunk driving where the driver who is driving under the influence walks away, but yet the others don't. And that is so sad. Firstly, it happens in the first place is so sad, but then the outcome is just, it makes you want to weep.
It's extremely sad, and it's something that can be avoided. And I'm laughing when you said, do not cut my pants off. I have a good friend. His name is Ron, and I'm not going to mention Ron's last name for privacy reasons, but Ron had a heart issue, and Ron had to go into the hospital like having a heart attack. And he said, no, you're not cutting my shirt off. It's a brand new shirt from Turn in Asheville, and you're going to put it on a hanger and hang it up over there. Sir, you're having a heart attack. I don't care. This is a brand new, beautifully ironed, bespoke shirt. You're taking off and putting it on the hanger. So you're the second person I heard say that. So Ron's an incredible gentleman, and it brought a great smile to my to my face. Which
I can relate to that. These leather pants I have been with me for a long time, and nobody was going to cut them off me. Nobody.
And this raises the big question: is nobody's going to cut your shirt off? Nobody's going to cut your pants off? And we talked a lot about individuals driving when they shouldn't have, but how do consumers, from a general perspective, approach safety? Are we in the minority where individuals in our lives taught us about a vehicle being a lethal weapon, or where do the majority of consumers stand with that? And is safety a selling point when they're buying a vehicle?
So many questions, Grayson. I think the majority of people do take safety seriously, but it's the people, and this is where I'm out on my bike and people wonder, what's this guy in this black motorbike with black leather and a mirrored helmet doing, gesticulating at me? Well, it's because their tire is very low at the back. So I try to warn them. When I see the lady reading the book on I-275 and she looks up as she turns the page, and I'm going, this is just crazy. These are the people who don't take it seriously. And unfortunately, they're the people that cause the incidents more often than not, and they get away with more than one thing, but they're the cause of it, but they survive and others unfortunately don't. But when it comes to some safety in vehicles, it's not a selling point for people. You could just imagine the sales guy saying, just imagine the number of airbags this car has on board. That's well worth the money. It's expected. Safety is expected. That's why NHTSA, safety is in there for a reason. And people have to ensure, as a watchdog maybe, or other words people would have for them, to ensure the safety of the public and the traveling public. And people just take it for granted that it is safe. And when it comes to automation, they take it for granted it's safe. And people need to be convinced, though, because take all the surveys you want, or take all the data from the surveys, and people are still on the fence. But they're on the fence for a reason, because we need to communicate. Well, first you need to communicate what's going on. We've got current problems. We've got to fix those, 40,000 down to zero, or just less than 40,000, less than 30,000, less than 20,000, against 100 million miles driven. So you might say, well, it's pretty good. We're at 1.1 or 1.2 fatalities per 100 million miles driven. That is pretty good. But it's absolute terms I look at and just say it's 40,000 people. And but it is, people expect it to be there, and we need to ensure it's there. But again, back to the old chestnut, you've got to take responsibility for what you do in it, in addition to the technology. And there has to be a responsibility to not the manufacturer, but to the dealership when selling the vehicle. The people have to be aware what they've got on board. And some people just say, just give me the keys or the fob or whatever it is, I'm off. Not that you need to have a 3-day intensive course, but they need to be aware. And it's not something I'll do later. They need to do now before they can take it on the road, because they're driving that lethal weapon again. But you need to be aware of what you've got on board and what you can expect from it. And it could be of a positive nature. Or if something happens, you thought, what the heck just happened? So you need to be aware.
You're right about dealer training. You're right about the responsibility. When I got in my vehicle about 3 years ago, I went in there and looked at him and said, okay, this is what I want. Oh, we have a similar one on the lot. I said, you don't understand. You don't know who I am. I want every ADAS option under the sun. And here's the, well, this one just missing this and missing that. You're not going to tell the difference. Okay. And I finally had to explain the guy. And I'm watching the show Big in France. And the guy pulls up this iPhone and says, look, I'm big in France. I'm a big comedian in France. Well, here in America, sir, it doesn't matter. And I pulled up the internet and said, oh, here it goes. I understand this technology. This is what I want. But the dealer training has to play a large role in this because even so, I knew what I was doing. I read the manual, but somebody gets the ADAS, they don't know how to use it. You have dealer training on one hand, and then on the other hand, you have driver monitoring. That debate is hot right now. You're getting a lot of interesting tech companies trying to solve the issue. You're getting debates in policy circles, which raises the big question. What role does driver monitoring play in the future of ADAS? Do you see it becoming mandatory just because of, I don't want to use the word of individuals abusing the system, but they are?
Ron White, there's a number of things. If you're looking to incentivize people, so you look in the UK, bless them, if you're caught using a cell phone or operating a cell phone, not hands-free or anything like that, it costs you big money because there'll be points on your license, directly impacts the insurance that you're going to pay for the vehicle, and that is big money. So you've hit somebody in the pocketbook. There's many, okay, I'm on my soapbox again. So in a number of cities, it is against the law to text while driving or doing anything with cell phones, but yet you're driving in those cities and you see it all the time. I just don't understand. So if people are not incentivized to do that, nothing will change. And you can say, I'm going to driver monitoring. Driver monitoring. You see the idiots going in there with weights zip tied to the steering wheel. Why? Okay, Ron White again. Or zip tying gloves onto the steering wheel. People are really, really ingenious. Is it what the mother of invention? Not a necessity, but it just people are very clever when they want or need to be for these stupid things. If only they could channel that in the right direction. But people will do that. Driver monitoring is the same. They'll get around it. There's chips for it. Everything under the sun. You'll get this on the internet somewhere. $9.99. This will stick this into a dongle and away you go. I just get frustrated, Grayson, with it because you just safety is so important. But some people have just lost the plot, man. They've just lost the plot.
They haven't. I mean, I've seen things where I've seen individuals eating ice cream out of a bowl while driving with their knees on the 101 in Northern California. The all-time most interesting, it's not the polite term to use, but greatest thing I've ever seen in a vehicle was I saw a hairdryer plugged into the cigarette outlet and somebody blow drying their hair while stuck in traffic. That was an all-time, you want to use, we'll go back to music again, greatest hit and file this under, you can't make this up. And if something happened or a CHP decides to go down the middle on a motorbike, this person moves the wheel a quarter of an inch, hits the gas 3 miles an hour, that officer's on the ground, and guess what? We have a crash because the individual didn't pay attention. That's why, Andy, the work that you're doing as a specialist on safety, the work that you're doing with Stantec is so important because you are going to make the world a better place. You are going to make the world a safer place. And I thank you for taking the time to come on here to give a masterclass because this has been an extremely, extremely insightful conversation. And I'd love to know this last thing. What would you like our listeners to take away with them? Because we covered a lot of ground. You had the best line on here. The data will always set you free. So Andy, what would you like the listeners to take away with them, sir?
I'm just a simple mechanical engineer from Scotland to Grayson. And I just say to you, always wear a seatbelt. And although automation is what I'm heavily engaged in, all of these things, you've got to start and keep up with the basics and take responsibility. Always think of the lethal weapon, put your seatbelt on and look around you and be aware. And okay, I don't even want to get on my soapbox again, but I've worn it out by the end of this. people want to be removed from a situation. You see the people walking along with their heads down looking at their phone. And why? Look around you, wherever you may be. And it's all, to me, it's not where you're getting to. You have to love the journey you're on. So just make sure it's a safe journey.
Love the journey you're on could be the name of a great record. Always wear your seatbelt. Always be alert. Always be aware, because if you do these things when you're driving a vehicle, you'll make the world a safer place as you continue to engineer the future. And thank you so much for sitting through this incredible conversation with an extremely bright individual. The future is autonomous, the future is bright, and the future is a culture of safety. Andy Smart, thank you so much, Professor, for coming on the Road to Autonomy.
Cheers, Grayson.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Road to Autonomy podcast. If you've enjoyed listening, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter @Road to Autonomy or email podcast@brulteco.com. The Road to Autonomy is produced by Brulte & Company. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of Brulte & Company. The content discussed in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, tax, investment, or business advice.